Good afternoon. I am just beyond excited about today. Today's conversation with the one and only Reverend Al Sharpton. But first, I want to just get a little bit of housekeeping things out of the way. This conversation today, if you want to share about it, please use hashtags Reverend Al Sharpton. You can use hashtags Rise Up, and you can use hashtags ABA, which would be great as well. So there's a lot of different things that if you're getting something great from this, which I'm praying and I know that you will, please feel free to share that using those hashtags today. But also thank you to the 8 regional book industry organizations who've been behind the scenes working tirelessly to put together an incredible season of classes, events, and networking opportunities to strengthen the work that all of us booksellers do. And just again, a special shout out to the ABA and to all of the regional organizations that really help us do the work that we do. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ramunda Young, and my husband, Derek, and our daughter, Mahogany, are the proud owners of MahoganyBooks in Washington, D.C., right here. And I'm excited about this afternoon's conversation with the Politics Nation's host, social justice activist, founder of the National Action Network, Baptist preacher, and I've noticed online a proud dad too. So please help me give it up for Mr. Reverend Al Sharpton. And people are probably clapping behind the scenes, but they can see us loud and clear. But I just really quickly want to say, man, thank you to you, Reverend, because of all the work that you've done for over 4 decades when it comes to giving us voice, speaking up, making sure you were in places that many of us could not go. And from a very personal space, just I want to take the liberty to say thank you for just delivering a powerful and searing speech on Juneteenth in my hometown of Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Black Wall Street is. And I say searing, you nailed it many, many, many times. That really spoke to me and actually left me feeling empowered, even from watching it here in DC and not being there in Tulsa. But I've heard from a lot of my neighbors and childhood friends that they left feeling taller and brighter too. So I just want to thank you for that. And you mentioned Terrence Crutcher in your speech, who I went to high school with, went to college with his sister Tiffany. And so just to be there and see you be there and represent them and the spirit that they've all come to the table with. I just appreciate that. So,
well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to read your bio because I kind of gave a little bit about it, but there's a little bit more I want to add, and then we'll get this started. So Reverend Al Sharpton is the host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and the founder and president of the National Action Network, one of the leading civil rights organizations in the world. With over 40 years of experience as a community leader, politician, minister, and advocate, the Reverend Al Sharpton is one of America's most renowned civil rights leaders. Sharpton also hosts the nationally syndicated radio show, Keeping It Real, which broadcasts in 40 markets 5 days a week. I don't know how you do that, 5 days a week. He resides in New York. And so thank you again, Reverend, for being here this afternoon. There's a lot of people who are excited to ask questions. I'm a part of this amazing community of booksellers, and those are the ones here tuned in live today. So we're excited about this new book, Rise Up. So let's dig in. So you have been at the forefront of civil and social justice for, like I said, over 40 decades. What motivates you to do this work after so many years when folks have counted you out time and time again? You talk about it in your book, Rise Up. What makes you continue to press onward? Why do you do this?
You know, I started very young. I was a boy preacher. I started in the Pentecostal church, and I actually preached my first sermon in front of a live audience when I was 4, about 900 people. So I grew up in the ministry. But when I was 12 years old, I became very interested in watching on the news civil rights. When you're a boy preacher, you don't go out and play much with the kids your age because their parents go to hear you preach, so they think it's awkward to hang out with you. And so I watched the news and I saw all of this going on down south. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. And then I started tuning into some of the issues in New York. And I just felt compelled to want to be a part of it. And I kept saying to my mother, I want to go to Adam Clayton Powell rallies in Harlem and all. And she was very much a fundamentalist Christian. She finally took me to our bishop in the Church of God in Christ, Bishop F.D. Washington, who I write about in the book, by the way. And he took me to Reverend William Jones, who was the head of Dr. King's chapter in New York. And I've been in it ever since. I felt it was my calling. I never wanted to pastor one church. I wanted to be involved in civil rights, social justice is my ministry. And I built National Action Network in the tradition of Dr. King, but doing it in the North. And one of the things that's interesting about the book is I thought after the achieving of the election of a Black president, and I haven't had access to it, there was about 5 or 6 civil rights leaders that had pretty consistent access to President Obama when he was in, when there was crisis or not, Trayvon Martin, Ferguson, all. We had more meetings than normal, but it was consistent meetings. And I had said, I'm going to be, when he gets out, I'm going to be 65. Most of the people that went kind of jobs that I did retire. I'm going to go, I want to build a civil rights museum in New York. I want to expand my radio and TV platform. And then Donald Trump was elected. Mm-hmm. And I literally said, wait a minute, maybe I better rethink this. And the board of National Action Network asked me and they voted. They said, we'll do whatever we need to do. We want you to stay on. Because a lot of what we fought for, police reform, healthcare, voting rights, is at stake. And so I decided, I say, all right, I'll stay another 3 or 4 years. And it was as Trump got worse, and I'd known Trump for at least 35 years. As he got worse, I said, America's at a crossroads. And at some point I decided, since I had the unique experience of working fairly closely with President Obama and knowing Donald Trump, I knew Trump from back in the 80s when Don King introduced us, and I'd sit at ringside with him at fights, and we got somewhat friendly. And I talk about some of those encounters in the book. I won't blow it. I want all of y'all to read the book. But I talk about several encounters and things that he would do and say, and we'd say when he was being very cordial. And then Central Park happened, and they convicted 5 young Black and brown boys in New York for raping a white woman in Central Park that they didn't do. And the whole town believed they did it. They were in an uproar. And I was leading marches with other activists supporting those 5 young boys. And Trump took out ads in every daily paper against those guys, not only saying they should be guilty, but they should be executed. And I marched on Trump. And he was like, how could Al Sharpton march on me? And we're friends. We meet at boxing matches and all. But I marched on him. And I saw that as, why are y'all pinpointing these boys? Over a period of years, he tried to make up with the so-called liberal side or left side, we call it New York. He supported Congressman Rangel. He would support a Latino for mayor. He came to my National Action Network convention twice. So, it's interesting now that he, attacks me. I'm a con man, I'm this, that, and the other. He never explained, well, then why were you going to his organization's events? And then he comes with this thing of birtherism when Barack Obama was running and became president. And at the time he started building the birther movement, or became the face of it, was around the same time that I started hosting Politics Nation on MSNBC. And I started every night at that time. MSNBC had Politics Nation 5 nights a week. Now it's on 2 nights a week on the weekend. And I every night was pounding Trump on birtherism. And then he's gone back to his Central Park racist day. And he had a guy call a mutual friend of mine, saying, why is Al calling me a racist. And I said, I didn't call him a racist, and I hadn't yet. I do now. I said, what he's doing is racist. And anyway, this friend said to me, well, this guy reached out for me, wants you and Trump to sit down and talk about it. Y'all know each other for years. And I said, yeah, but he had discrimination suits. Then he went to Central Park. Yeah, he's acted friendly the last few years, but this is as racist as it gets. This is really saying it's us against them. And but I agreed to meet. And I went and met with him at Trump Towers. The guy that set up the meeting was Michael Cohen. And I talk about Cohen, who later, when he got in trouble, called me to have prayer with him. All this is in the book. And I talk about that meeting with Trump. So I felt with me having the unique experience of one of the few public figures that have dealt somewhat closely with both, they symbolize the crossroads. One symbolized the continuation of fighting for voting rights and health care for everybody and dealing with workers' rights, labor rights, and gender equality and LGBTQ rights, with President Obama signed into law. The other represents trying to revoke health care, trying to water down voting rights, trying to interfere with LGBTQ rights and gender rights. America's at the crossroads. And I decided to write this book to talk about those policies and to give anecdotes of those that personify the two roads, to say to people, when you vote, you're not just voting on whether you like Trump or whoever the nominee is, which is Biden. You're voting on which road America should take. And let me give my experience on both sides.
Yeah, and that's interesting. When you say the crossroads, and I know your book, I have it here, I'm so excited. Confronting a country at the crossroads, right? So how do we actually get to these crossroads? True, Donald Trump is president, but America voted him in and got us here. And so what feelings and ideas led us from Barack Obama to Donald Trump? How did we even get to this crossroads?
I think that many of us got there because I think that there was, and I talk about they're purists on both sides. I think that there was some purists that felt that Obama didn't go too far enough left. And I think he went as far as he could go with a Senate stacked against him. Don't forget, they blocked one of his Supreme Court nominees for over a year. And they wanted this way or no way. They weren't going to help Hillary. And I think underneath it all, everybody felt Hillary would win anyway. And she didn't. And now we wake up, and I talk about in the book how the night of the election, I went by Javits Center where the Hillary people were planning the big fireworks and thousands were there. And I left there and went to a private party that they were looking at the returns. And, you know, some of the, you know, Paul McCartney of the Beatles and all, it was about 50 people in this very private party. And I went there because my girlfriend, Aisha, said, let's go where we can get something to eat. I don't eat at night, but she does. And when the screen started turning red in certain states, Ohio went Republican, Florida. And I never forget one of the celebrities said to me, Al, is she going to lose? And I started saying to myself, unbelievably, I think she is. And I left, and by the time I got home, she had lost. I don't think people thought that we would be turning as acutely as we did, because people knew Trump, yeah, with the bombast, yeah, with the personality, but I don't think that a lot of people that voted for him that were very right-wing or that even were moderate felt that he was going to just drastically go the other way. And I don't think those on the Democratic side and the progressive side actually thought it was within the realm of the possible that he was going to win. So when he got in, and he called me about a month after he got in, invited me to Mar-a-Lago. I told him I'm not coming doing photo ops. I've been fighting him since birtherism. I at that point felt he was a racist, period, and said it because I didn't feel that you could be comfortable touting racist stuff unless you were in fact a racist. And I wouldn't go meet with him. But I write about that in the book. And when he started going right after the Affordable Care Act, they withdrew consent decrees in all of the cities that had consent decrees on policing. They withdrew them all. And a consent decree is based on a city having a pattern of police abuse. So this wasn't just the Justice Department picking on people just to pick on them. This was a pattern. Knock that out. They withdrew from voting rights lawsuits that the Justice Department had initiated against North Carolina and Texas. So this was clearly, we were going a different road. And as one who had spent at that time almost 4 decades fighting to go this road and finally seeing slowly outreaching this road of securing voting rights and dealing with police reform without being castigated that we were anti-police, we were just anti-police that broke the law, going toward health care and what it meant for people that couldn't afford it. All of a sudden, we snapped back to another road. That's what led to my saying, no, we got to fight Trump with all we have, and we've got to explain to people that this is about which way this country's going, and that's what the book is about.
Yeah. And you touched on so much, and I'm trying to give the book away either because I do want people to get it. I do want the booksellers to make sure they have it in their hands. But you also talk about this unique time that we're in. We're in the midst of a tremendous civil unrest with the recent murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Terrence Crutcher, my childhood friend, and just countless others. How can those of us, and many of us do, feel helpless? How can we impact the policies and really dismantle systemic processes? And we're again on here with booksellers who are very at the front lines of a lot of people who come into their stores with different opinions and different mindsets and things of that nature. But how do we, not just booksellers, but how do we combat those feelings of helplessness and help impact policies and dismantle the systemic process? How can we do that?
That's part of the book, because what I say at the end is that you may never lead a march like I do. You may never host a radio or TV show, but everybody can be an activist. And I try to go through steps that everybody can do and what they need to do. Whether they agree with my politics or not, everybody can be active, and everybody should first choose which road they want to see the country go down and how to be active in it. I won't give the steps up, but it's in the book. And I think booksellers should say that I'm in a unique position, that I've known both players in both roles, and I talk about it extensively, and I talk about the policies that I have fought for and how they could be active. That's what Rise Up is. You need to rise up. Don't be neutral, even if you're going to disagree with me. Rise up and stand up for something, because this will be a decisive moment that will guide the next half century. And I felt compelled to do it for whatever reason. I'm a minister first. God put me in a position to know Obama and Trump and be in the inside and the outside. I mean, I ended the book getting ready for the 20th, for the March, 2020 March on Washington that Martin Luther King III and I held. And for me to be leading marches on the outside, eulogizing George Floyd, who was the impetus of this new wave, and going all the way back to the Obama years and all, and dealing with everything from not only Howard Beach in my youth till now, but just from Trayvon to Floyd. I was in a unique position to really give the inside stories. Like, for example, when we had, and I wrote about this in the book, I'll give this away, when we had the first big march for Trayvon, we rallied up, got 10,000 people to Sanford, Florida. I got on the plane that morning to head to Sanford and got a text from my sister that my mother died. And I had to wrestle with whether I was going to do the rally or whether I was going to go to Alabama to take care of arrangements for my mother. And then I'm sitting there brokenhearted. I knew she was sick, but I didn't know she was going to die. And I went anyway because I felt my mother would want to go. And when I landed and I went, by then it hit the news, and I went and met Trayvon's parents, and we were going to meet with the federal officials. They were surprised I came because they had heard my mother died, so they thought I turned around. And the phone rang. It was President Obama to give me condolences about my mother. And he said, "Where are you?" I told him in Florida about Trayvon Martin. He said, "I heard about that case." And we talked about, those are the kind of anecdotes that are peppered through the book as I talk about policy and why I think that we're at the crossroads.
No, there's a lot of good, and I don't want to give out the behind the scenes pieces of the books too. But I do, if you would oblige, give. I'm thinking of you give solid tools for each of us to rise up in the book, and so without giving away too much, can you share 2 ways in which booksellers here can rise up and make a difference in a world that's just at this unique moment in history?
They need to, one way is you need to, with everybody you engage, say, do you understand this moment in history?
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think you should do about it? If it's to vote, if it's to have a discussion, don't even ask people to go outside their circle. People touch enough people in their own life, where they go to school, where they go to church, where they go play bingo, their family. To just say, you registered to vote, you gonna vote. Do you realize that we're in the middle of COVID-19? This has never happened in a century. And there was political decisions made that brought us to this stage. People can start with their circle. That's one thing that I talk about in the book. And everybody can make sure that everybody around them is registered to vote and vote without any impediments. Whether they're voting for who I would support or not, those are 2 things, but there are others that I give in the book. But people think it takes a lot. Movements, one road or another, come from the bottom up, not the top down. We think we need $1 zillion and TV ads. You could influence 20 people, and it could be the difference of the amount of people that vote, and that amount could be, if I've seen elections spent on 5 votes, so everybody is important.
Yeah, I think that's huge to be able to reach out into the circle that we have right now. And you're right, booksellers, bookstores, we see people all day long, those of us who have reopened and meeting people, whether it's online or whether it's in our physical stores. And I think that's a very salient point for us to kind of internalize that we can do something. There's a saying, bloom right where you're planted, right? So we can bloom right where we are. And I think being able to.
And I think it's important. You know, right now, booksellers have, a lot of books out, and I know that everybody's excited about Michael Cohen's book, who I mentioned, or Woodward's book. But those books give you documentation of, inside what happened. But my book gives you some of what happened, but also what it means, and then what we can do about it. And there's a difference between having great, dignified gossip, and then therefore, what are we going to do about it? So what I've said, and I'll probably get in trouble with saying it, but what I've said is there are those now writing about whereas this is what happened. I'm writing about therefore we need to rise up and do something about it. And let me give you some background as to what I think can be done, whether you agree with me or not. And I've been doing it for 40 years. I mean, example, we just had the March on Washington right there where you are, and tens of thousands of people in the middle of a pandemic and didn't have a COVID tick go up. So I think I know what a few suggestions should be, because I've been able to operate when people did not think we could.
That's right. Come on. You did. You held it down here. That's interesting that the uptick, that piece there. So that's huge, very huge. And you're right, your book allows us to feel empowered. We walk away with tools and activities and actions to take. And I think that's what a lot of people are seeing. We watch the tape of George Floyd, or we watch the news broadcast of Breonna Taylor. A lot of us are feeling like, what can we do? So having this book in our hands to kind of share with our friends, share with our families, share with our customers, I think leaves us in a very empowered place. But I don't want to take up all the time because I'm getting excited. I have one last question. We're going to open it up for Q&A. So as a pastor, I'm going to see if I can call you out and see if you're on your game right now. But as a pastor, many of you have your favorite scriptures. And in the book, you listed Psalms 37 as one of yours. Why does that one resonate with you most? And I have it here. I don't know if you know it offhand or not.
I know it. I tell you, it's an interesting story. And you did read the book. James Brown, the Godfather Soul, was like a father to me. I met him when I was a teenager. His son and I were close. His son got killed. I became like a replacement for him, and he became the father that I didn't have. My father left when I was 10 years old. And James Brown, who was not a churchgoer earlier in out. It's very short. He was in his last few years. The scripture he loved was the 37th Psalm. And it got me to read it a lot because James Brown, this, tremendous performer, loved 37 Psalms. Mm-hmm. And I read it, fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thy envious against the workers of iniquity. And he would always say that. He started getting in legal trouble. He always mumbled this to himself and read it. But then after he died, and I did his eulogy, all 3 funerals of James Brown, I was the eulogy. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting with his daughters, Deanna and Yama, at his house. And right next to the bed was the Bible open to the 37 Psalms, which meant he read it the night before he died or went to the hospital. He later died 2 days later or that morning. And I read the whole psalm, and it hit me that what I really liked about that psalm was not the fret not thyself, the first 2 verses, but if you read further, it says, David says, I was young, but now I'm old, and I've seen many things. Well, one thing I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor their seed beg for bread. And that's why that's my favorite song, because even in the darkness of standing there in the cemetery committing George Floyd's body, even in going through 9/11, I had to remind myself that God never forsakes the righteous. It's going to be all right. And that's the psalm that gives me the strength to keep fighting, that I really believe in the wave of history, right does always end up winning. That sometimes takes longer than I would like and you would like. Yeah. But in the end, God doesn't forsake the righteous.
Come on, Reverend, you knew that scripture. You knew it. But I just want to say thank you for sharing that, sharing your wisdom, sharing your expertise, sharing your journey, because a lot of us are on the outside, right? And so to be in this conversation with you who've been behind those lines and risking your life and you're over and over again, I just want to say thank you. I've admired you for many, many years, and just know that many of us are supporting you. Many of us are doing our own work in our own communities to rise up, and to know that you're out in the forefront for us is a blessing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to open it up for Q&A, and I see the first one here. And so the first one is, people must remember that the difference between a moment and a movement is sacrifice. We booksellers sacrifice so much to keep our bookstores open. And let me see. I'm waiting for, I think that's the end of it. Keep our bookstores open. What was your biggest inspiration when it comes to that? What's your biggest inspiration?
My biggest inspiration has been the older people that were in the civil rights movement used to always tell me, don't start something that you're not going to finish. And that you got to serve. Yes, it's all right to have ambition. Yes, it's all right to have ego. But ambition and ego mean nothing if you can't say you served somebody. And as booksellers at this point, in all of this social unrest, pandemic, fires now, you are there to really give people the opportunity to study something, read something that can focus them through situations that they can't do anything about, but they can read and they can study and they can be inspired and they can be instructed. And I think it's important that you have something in the midst of a storm. It's like being out on an ocean in a rocky boat because of the wave. Everybody needs stability. And I think bookstores and booksellers stabilize us because we can anchor down into some literature that can give us a sense of where we are and what is stable. Because the biggest problem we have today is everybody is active that is in my world, but other people are just unstable. And it's almost like they don't even know what to do. One of the reasons I think George Floyd caught on so more than others is because it happened in the middle of COVID-19 and there was no distraction. Everybody was watching the news. Be watching every day, hoping they could say, oh, we can go out now. Oh, it's evaporating now, like the president said. There was no sports, so there was no distraction. You had to watch the serious TV or old movies or nothing. There was no football, was no baseball, was no basketball. And when they saw this man with this knee on his neck that long. They couldn't avoid it. It happened with a chokehold with Eric Garner, but there were distractions. But the whole world saw this. And the whole world is still kind of halfway locked down, halfway, not all the way back. And that is where booksellers can step in the gap and give people an array of things that can intellectually stabilize.
Yeah, absolutely. And the conversation, there, I hear echo on my side, but the conversations that we can host in our spaces, I think, is huge. Candid, real, authentic conversations that a lot of times in other spaces you can't. So I'm excited that we have your book and many books to kind of lean on to help propel those type of conversations. So you're right, that stability that that bookstores and these institutions really provide. So another question that's here, what is your advice for younger activists in today's world? We have young people who are at home, or a lot of them are starting back to school, whether online or not, but they were at home. They heard these conversations between parents, and when parents get on the phone and they're talking about George Floyd, and a lot of them really wanted to do something too. What would your advice be for younger activists in today's world be?
I think that younger activists ought to decide what is going to be the goal of their activism. Are they going to try to change laws? One of the reasons we had the big march a couple weeks ago in Washington was to say the Senate will not entertain the George Floyd Policing and Justice Act, and the House has already passed, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So ours was about legislation. Theirs may be about police reform in a local county, or maybe something on their school campus. What is the goal? And then what is the strategy to reach the goal? And don't do it my way, develop your way. I'm a generation behind John Lewis's generation. John Lewis is 15 years older than me. I was coming up closer to Jesse Jackson, who was also 13, 14 years older than me. But I did it my way because I didn't come out of the South. I came out of New York. So in New York, you had to have a certain swag and a certain rhythm. And I did things more flamboyant because I'm competing with Broadway lights. Broadway never closed. And if you didn't do certain things that were, quote, outrageous in New York, they wouldn't pay any mind. In other cities, you put out a policy paper, it was the news. To get attention in New York, you had to shut New York down or do different things. So young people ought to apply to what environment, the geopolitics that they're operating in. There's a different movement needed in Pittsburgh than Tulsa, where you come from, because you got to deal with the nature of the problem in that area and the people in that area and how they think. If you're trying to win something, if you're just trying to be a show person and you're going to do it your way and don't care, which I had to grow out of, then you just do your thing. But if you're really trying to win some legislative change or some reform in terms of how policing works or healthcare works, you got to win enough people over to your side. So you got to be strategic, and you got to develop a style that complements the goals rather than say the goals has got to complement your given style.
That was it. Nailed it. So your words have been, another question here, your words have been so powerful during these times. And I mentioned it earlier too, that your voice has been here for decades in this space. But what sustains you? What keeps you at a level of peace, if you have that level of peace? What sustains you in this space doing this work?
I think that, as I said earlier, I felt it was the reason and the calling that I had as a minister. I'm still very much in my ministry. I preach at churches, even doing virtual services. I never wanted one church. I wanted to be, Dr. King gave up his church. I was in the tradition of, if you don't have to be at one church, you can reach more people being in different churches. And so I do 80 sermons a year. National Action Network, my civil rights group, we have rallies every Saturday. But we're going out in our 29th year. I'm there every Saturday. And what gives me peace is the work. I'm most at peace doing the work. I mean, I am more restless not doing organizing toward the next legislative array or next march or next gathering of people, or not speaking than I am up there. When I'm up speaking or organizing or marching, I go into another zone. I'm most at peace. And that's why I believe that that's what I was born to do. I'll never forget Michael Brown's mother. Michael Brown was the teenager killed by police in Ferguson, Missouri, 6 years ago. And she spoke at one of our National Action Network events. And it kind of stunned me. She quoted Mark Twain. She said that Mark Twain said the two most important moments in your life is the moment you're born and the moment you find out why you were born. And I said, wow, that's deep. And she said, I believe that my son was killed and I discovered the reason I was born, despite on behalf of mothers of children like this. And I think that that's what keeps me at peace. I believe that's why I was born. Most people, I'm convinced, or many, if not most, died never knowing why they were here. And I mean, we're not here just to get a car and a house. All that'll be gone. I mean, 2 minutes, I preach funerals. 2 minutes after you're dead, nobody cares what kind of car you had or how much money you had in the bank. It's gone. Somebody else will be driving that car and they won't even know it was yours if your family sells it. But the reason you were here will outlive you.
When he talked about Michael Brown's mom and her knowing that quote, knowing that passage there, it is so true, knowing our purpose while we're here. But all this time that you've done this work, do you ever get discouraged? Do you ever feel like, that you want to give up this work? It could be a purpose. We all have a purpose, but sometimes even as a bookstore owner, we know for my husband and I that it is important for us to put books by Black people into people's hands. And it gets tiresome sometimes, but it still propels us. Do you ever get tired?
Oh yeah, I've been tired, I've been discouraged. I've gone through a lot of stuff. I was stabbed once leading a march. I survived that. I've been prosecuted, all kinds of stuff. And I remember once right wing had come after me about taxes or something. And I was complaining to my pastor, Reverend Jones. And Reverend Jones had this deep baritone voice. And he said, oh, I get it. He says, so you want to be in the pantheon of civil rights leaders like Martin, because he and Dr. King knew each other well, and the others, but you want to have a trouble-free trip. They had to do jail and this and that, but you don't want to do none of that. You just want the accolade. And that would always make me come out of it and say there is going to be bad times. There is going to be days that you say, why am I doing whatever it is, if it's selling books or doing what I do? That's when the test comes. You cannot ever go to the next grade, the next level at what you do without passing a test. And a test is not what's easy for you. If we wrote our test, it wouldn't be a test. It's like going to school. You can't pass a college exam on an elementary school test. You got to pass college work. And the higher you go, the harder the test. But if you can pass the test, then you make it to the next level. And so now when I face a challenge, I say to myself, oh, I must be getting ready to go a little higher. I'm going to step up because this is hard. I'd rather quit. But nope, I'm going a little further because I just want to see how far I can go in life. And I think that no test, then you can't know. We say in the church, no test, no testimony.
Testimony. Come on, Pastor. That's right. I know that well. Very well. And you're right. It does get hard. It does get tiresome, but just keeping it at the forefront of our mind, why we do what we do, will help us to get through those valleys. Yeah, you hit it on the head. Another question here is, what books have been important to you over the years in your fight for civil rights and social justice?
I read as a youngster, Reverend Jones and the older ministers that mentored me. I read a lot of Reinhold Niebuhr, Moral Man in Immoral Society. Was one of the first books I read, which was for a teenager hard. I had to read it and answer questions and what the words meant. I'm going to junior high school reading Reinhold Niebuhr and Arnold Toynbee and I read a lot about institutionalized sin because I was a minister. And Niebuhr talked about moral man and immoral society, that good people could be part of immoral institutions and don't understand that they're perpetuating what is wrong. I read one of the books probably that meant a lot to me was Paul Tillich's book, Love, Power, and Justice. And that was a guiding book in my life. And I read a lot of Howard Thurman, who was a Black theologian that Dr. King admired. I read a lot of those books. I read now, or I read, when I was a boy preacher, my original pastor, Bishop Washington, used to go in his study after morning church service and read, and he'd underline books. And I'd take a book, and I'm 5, 6, 7 years old, and I'm underlining. I couldn't even read. And so, but it made me a voracious reader, and I never stopped reading. And now I get up early in the mornings. I get up before dawn, work out, do my prayer meditation. I read out. I read every, all over the internet, read every newspaper, and then I read a couple of chapters every morning. And I'm a real reader. And I think that it's important people read because you don't know everything and you never stop that. I'm like a sponge. I read. I'm reading stuff now. I read Woodward's book now, but I'm also reading some theology. So you might see me any given day on the road with 1 or 2 books, and they're not there to, because somebody might take a picture. They're there because I'm reading them. I still read books. I try not to do everything online. I like the book in my hand. Yeah, right.
So if there was one book you think everybody should read, what would you say that book would be for you? What would you suggest that book?
If I were to tell everybody to read a book, I would tell them to read Dr. King's book, Why We Can't Wait. In that book, he talks about why you have to act. In many ways, it's somewhat the theme I'm doing in Rise Up. In it, he has his letter from the Birmingham jail. But why we can't wait. Don't let other people set the time on when you have to move forward and make your moment in history.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. There's a lot of people writing books in the middle of COVID, which is blowing my mind. So for you to have finished this, make it relevant, have George Floyd in it, have Breonna, I think that's awesome. I was just thinking of some of the books that I've read over the years. I've read one called Assata by Assata Shakur, and her journey as a woman has really resonated with me. And just her history, her strength, and her power. And I get that from when I read your book too, when I hear about all the journey that you've had and the front line that you've been in, where people have just talked to you crazy. People have, tried to throw your name out, and you still, here you are still rising and still standing on principle and still standing in a space of great honor, I would say personally. And so just for all of us who recommend books, who read books, I think having this one in our arsenal, like I said, Assata was one of mine. I also just recently read Ed Gordon's book called Conversations in Black.
Yeah.
And so that was a powerful, it was kind of like being a fly on the wall between all of you. He reached out to about 40, I think, different leaders and entertainers. And so just being a part of that conversation and hearing it as well. So just for some of the booksellers out there, definitely read Rise Up. But then there's also some great ones that the Reverend mentioned, and hopefully the ones that I've mentioned may be on your list as well. So do you have a favorite bookstore? I mean, I know you're NY, New York and everything. So do you have a favorite bookstore?
There was a bookstore in Harlem that's closed now, Liberation Bookstore is where I used to go. Una Mozak, she passed now. That was my last favorite bookstore. But I still now, every once in a while, may go to a Barnes & Noble on the west side of Manhattan. But I usually look books up and send somebody on staff to get it because, going around a lot of cities, you just end up taking more selfies in the store than being able to look for the book. So I try not to do that because I take my reading serious. But if I'm somewhere like in a town and I'm going to speak and I got an hour or so to kill, this is of course pre-pandemic, I'll always say, let's find a bookstore. There's always near an airport. Even now with a lot of bookstores closed, there's always big bookstores and I'll go in and usually there's not a lot of people in and I'll spend a lot of time in there and spend money. And the guy traveling with me will always say, oh God, I'm going to have 20 pounds of books to carry back. because I just buy stuff that I may not read this one for a couple of months because I've got two I'm working on. But I definitely am one that supports a lot of y'all because I still buy a lot of books.
Thank you. So what is next for you, Reverend Al Sharpton? What's next for you after, what's next?
I don't know. I know that I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing with National Action Network at least another 2 or 3 years, as I promised the board. I know that I'm going to be on doing my radio and TV shows as long as I can. And I want to build this Civil Rights Museum. But I'm also, you know, I'm 65 now, and I don't know if Biden's going to win or Trump's going to win. But I know that whoever wins, I'm going to be out there holding them accountable and standing up. I certainly don't support Trump, but even if Biden wins, I'm going to hold him accountable because to me, it's not about a party, it's about a principle. And I had so much invested in me that I think that those that poured into me have the right to expect that I'm not going to let us go down the other road, the wrong road, and I at least not be standing there saying, no, let's go this way, let's go this way. And I'm going to keep trying to do that as long as I can.
Well, I thank you. We've come to the end. I've gotten a little note that says we're wrapping up. I just want to say thank you. And I will continue to look for your voice as we go into this crazy, I say crazy, just for me, everybody's not crazy, this crazy election season, because there's so much on the line, I personally feel, and I don't make this a big political thing, but there's a lot riding on the line, I feel, in this election. And so I know your voice will be one that a lot of us will be tuning in to see and to get your thoughts and your feedback and your perspective, so that as we stand at this crossroad, we still have some kind of direction. We still have somebody out there with this clarion call helping us to see the way. And that's what your voice has been. So thank you, Reverend Al.
Thank you. And I hope that people sell the book, push the book, tell people that despise me, read the book, and you'll find out why you despise him or why you like him, because he had a front row seat in what has happened. And you might want to know what happened from the inside and the outside. So it doesn't hurt my feelings if my critics are there. In fact, if everybody agreed with me, I'd feel like I wasn't doing anything.
I know that's right. So we will end right there, Reverend. Thank you again.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless you. Take care.
All right. I didn't even feel like an hour.
It was a really good talk.
She was good.
Yeah. Hey, Rev,